Salt. It is everywhere. On my lips, in the corners of my eyes, deep in the fissures of palms turned to gnarled bark from the bite of the axe. I remember the taste of my own sweat, bitter with the aftertaste of iron. A year of Mycenaean peace washed away by one brief visit from Copreus. His voice sounded like the screech of ungreased wheels. The hind, golden horns, brazen hooves. As we marched into Arcadia, I could not feel my own strength. Strength is a delusion. You think you are powerful until you collide with time. And there, in the mountains, time flows differently. It does not run. It flows around you like the cold water of a highland river, leaving a sediment of exhaustion upon your bones. Mud, the deep, gray mantle of the earth. We clawed into it with our fingers, the stairs we hewed into the cliffs. Every strike of the hammer shuddered through my spine. It wasn't beautiful. It was filthy. Limestone dust mingled with the icy water of clouds, drifting through us, hardening upon my face into a cement mask. And then the true mountains began, a world where stone displaces the sky. The crags of Arcadia are the ribs of the world, jutting through the skin of existence. We hacked through thickets, and every fallen tree groaned as if a god were dying within it. The timber was damp and heavy. It smelled of mold and antiquity. We threw trunks across chasms, and I saw the leaden mist swirling at the bottom, a place that had never seen the sun. One false step, and you become part of that mist. I remember the cold, that specific cold of the heights that doesn't just bite the skin, but creeps inside into the very marrow of the bone. Avalanches. They do not sound like thunder. They sound like the whisper of 1,000 hungry mouths. Icy dust crawled under my tunic, pricking my flesh with 1,000,000 tiny needles. My fingers turned blue, numb, hooks of flesh scratching at the icy crust of the rocks. We climbed higher to where storm clouds drifted just above our heads. I felt their weight. The hair on my arms stood up from the tension in the air. Every breath at that altitude is a struggle. The air is thin. It does not feed the blood, it only mocks it. And then, a flash. It sliced through the gray twilight like a blade through old cloth. The first rays of the sun stained the snowy peaks a soft pink, the color of a fresh wound. Gold. The hind stood upon a ledge. Her brazen hooves gripped the stone. I heard her breathe, a sound purer than my own wheezing. A low, heavy hum thrummed in my ears like the sound of a distant rockfall. But she was silence. Why did I not bring my bow? She must remain alive. A leap, and time tore apart. I ran. I did not know the human body could endure the state of decay for so long. My lungs burned. Every breath was a swallow of scorched ash. Heels bloodied. The mud of Arcadia gave way to the sands of the northern steppes, then to the needles of the forests. But the scent of the hind did not fade. She smelled of ozone and wild herbs. We ran for months, or years. The days blurred into a single endless ribbon of light and shadow. The sun became an enemy. It seared the last remnants of moisture from my mouth. I chewed leaves I could not name just to feel some wetness on my tongue. The taste of bitterness became my only companion. Iolaus vanished somewhere beyond the horizon of memory. All that remained was the rhythm of my footsteps and the clatter of brazen hooves ahead. Thump, 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 thump. Those weren't hooves. It was my heart hammering against my ribs, trying to break out of this cage of meat. Hyperborea. There the sky is the color of a dead fish. The cold is so thick you can touch it with your hand. The river Ister. Water black as oil. She stopped. I saw her eyes, large, dark mirrors. There was no fear in them. There was something worse, a question, as if she were asking me, Why do you destroy yourself for that which does not belong to you? My muscles trembled so violently I could hear the sound, a fine, high-pitched hum of fibers tearing. I reached out, fingers caked in layers of filth nearly brushed the gold. 1 centimeter, one lifetime. She bolted, again, back toward Arcadia. The movement was so effortless it made me sick. The language of my joints was the language of iron, hers was the language of the wind. The moment it all ended was not a flash of glory, it was a slow guttering of resistance. Arcadia met us with a damp fog that clung to the skin like wet wool. We stood facing one another, I, whose muscles had turned to knotted ropes from the endless pursuit, and she. She was no longer the wind, she had become flesh. I saw her hide quiver on her flanks, her spindly legs shaking. The hind did not submit to me. She submitted to the exhaustion that eventually grinds down all living things. Her eyes. There was no fear. There was a weariness of such scale that it felt cosmic. I took a step. My boot squelched in the mud. Every movement echoed in the back of my head with a dull, throbbing pain. The world narrowed to the distance of an outstretched arm. My fingers slowly closed in on the gold. I expected her to vanish, but she stood still. Only a slight tremor passed through her body. When I touched the horns, the metal was not warm. It was searingly cold. I felt her pulse through the gold, a fast, erratic beat, as if a small bird were trapped inside her. I felt no triumph, only a heavy metallic void. I brought her to the ground, gently but with the heavy inevitability of stone settling upon stone. The scent of a wild beast mingled with my own salt stench. Ropes bit into my shoulder as I bound her legs, those same brazen hooves that had led me through hell for a year. She did not struggle. She simply stared at the sky. I hoisted her onto my shoulders. My spine answered with a dry crack, like an old beam in a derelict house. Her head lay against my cheek. I heard her breath, short, ragged. We became one, a tired demigod and a broken divine toy. And then, her. Artemis appeared on the path suddenly, a slender maiden in a short, light tunic, yet there was so much steel in her bearing that the surrounding trees seemed like rotting reeds. In her hands, a hunting bow, across her shoulders, a quiver full of death. Her face was beautiful and yet merciless, like a winter sun. Her eyes blazed with fury. "Oh, greedy mortals!" Her voice was not a shout, yet it rebounded off the cliffs like thunder. "Why do you hunt my creature?" I knew her, the goddess whose purity was sharper than a knife. I stood before her, encrusted in filth, sweat, and another man's will. I felt every one of my sins under that gaze. Every word had to be shoved through the layer of dry dust on my lips. I spoke to her of Zeus, of the command, of the yoke borne not by me but by my blood. But most importantly, I gave her a promise as quiet as the rustle of dry leaves. She will return. I will not take her life. I will only show her to that worthless lump of flesh hiding behind the walls of Mycenae, and then I will undo the bonds. She will be yours again soon, goddess. Her gaze softened. It was the understanding of a hunter. She stepped toward the bound hind, and I saw her fingers, long and clean, touch the golden horns I had just gripped with my filthy paws. "Go your way, Heracles," she said, and her voice became like the wind in the pines. "I will not take the prize from one who has become a slave to his own fate. But remember, she returns to me." She vanished, simply dissolved into the air, leaving behind only the scent of pine needles and a lingering chill in the lungs. Mycenae, the stifling stench of the city, smoke from the pyres, the smell of waste, the crowds. Eurystheus sat in his chair, his face oily with grease and fear. He looked at the hind, but he saw his own death. My body was black with the grime of the road, and I saw him recoil in nausea at the sight of me. Take her. I opened my fingers. Fulfilling the promise was easier than carrying the weight. A golden flash, the strike of brass on stone. The hind vanished instantly, as if she had never been. And once more, only rust, dust, and the taste of blood on a bitten lip. I still feel the weight of that hind on my shoulders, even now when my hands are empty. They call it a labor, but I only remember how hard it was to breathe in Hyperborea, and the smell of a sacred animal's wool when it is soaked with your human sweat. Now she is free, but I am not. It does not wash off, not with any rain.